Maori ora ki te whare, tēnā koutou katoa. Ki te mana whanua o te rohe ne, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou ki te kaupapa o te rāne. Ko waio. No airani me Ingalani o kutupuna. Engari kua noho o ki Aotearoa, mō nā tō te kaimahi kua pāhurua. Ko Tara Solomon toku ingoa, hei kai whakahaere mātua o Kaitiaki kindergartens. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. May there be health and vitality in this place today and for everybody here. But I really wanted to acknowledge firstly the mana whanua and the kaupapa that brings us together, which is Infocare Roadshow. Thank you for the wonderful session this morning and how articulating where we're at and what will help us going forward in terms of technology and support and trust. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm actually from England. I have Irish heritage, but Aotearoa has been my home for the last 18 years. And for more than a decade, I have been working in the early childhood education sector with a deep passion for growing people, big and small. Over the last few years, I've focused on leading people-centered sustainable change. And today, I feel really privileged to share some of that journey with you and some of the learnings along the way. At the heart of my leadership is the concept ARCO, the understanding that teaching and learning are inseparable. It reminds us that when we lead, we need to be learning. And when we're learning, it grows the capacity for us to lead. We're living in some significant times of change. Shifts in regulation, rising costs of living, changing demographics, all things Stephen was talking about, increasing expectations on educators and services. And often it can feel like we're being asked to paddle harder while the waka itself, water is coming in. So I just want to take a moment to reflect. Reflect on what is currently putting the most pressure on your waka. Is it people? Is it compliance? Is it the constant change or the staffing or parent expectations? Or are you just trying to hold it together while quietly sinking yourself? Just pause for a couple of seconds for you to think about. The truth is, you're not struggling because you don't care. You're not struggling because you don't have the skills to do the roles and the mahi that we've been given to do. We're struggling because the systems keep asking us to paddle harder instead of redesigning the waka. This presentation isn't about resilience as endurance. It's about creating cultures where people don't merely survive work, but they thrive within it. Burnout is often treated as an individual problem. We talk about self-care, resilience, and boundaries. And those things do matter. But often burnout is actually a systems problem, wearing a personal name tag. People are exhausted not because they're weak, but because they're carrying disconnected work, invisible work, compliance-heavy work, emotionally expensive work. And when that becomes constant, even passionate, skilled people begin to lose energy. The paradox here is that doing more of the right work energizes us. But when we do more of the wrong work, it burns us out. So perhaps the question isn't, how do people cope? But it's how do we redesign work so energy increases? I want to tell you a little bit of a story about Maya. Maya is actually my monstera plant at home. And she's the only plant that I've managed to ever keep alive. And I've killed many. Maya means courage. And she reminds me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's actually fearing fear and growing anyway. But Maya initially was struggling in a dark space in a bedroom. But when I moved her to a light spot near a window, she began to thrive. Maya didn't thrive because she suddenly became a better plant. She thrived because of where she was positioned. The light, the conditions, the environment. Nothing about Maya fundamentally changed. The environment did. And people are no different. Angela Duckworth explores this shift in her newer work called Situated. Moving beyond ideas of grit alone as passion and perseverance, she argues that success is deeply shaped by context, where and how people are situated. People thrive when they have purpose, because it creates energy, when they have meaning, because it creates stamina, and when they have belonging, because it creates resilience. So our role is not to ask people to try harder, it's to intentionally design environments where people are positioned to grow. Culture is not a vibe or a post on a wall or a morning tea, although I do like muffins. But culture is something that gets rewarded. It's what gets repeated and it's what gets protected. And as mentioned earlier, culture is always designed, but it's either intentional or accidental. And accidental culture is generally chaos. At Kaitiaki, we intentionally celebrate what matters. At our support office, we have a bell. Whenever someone has something worth celebrating, we ring it. It could be completing a project, receiving positive whānau feedback, a personal milestone, supporting colleagues, enrollment numbers rising, or simply living out our values. Because the culture we celebrate is the culture that we strengthen. One of the first things I did when I joined Kaitiaki kindergartens was to flip the traditional leadership structure. Leadership shifted from being people directing people to serving and supporting people. This distributed leadership is not about everybody having the same role, but it's about recognizing that leadership and wisdom exist throughout an organization. Daniel Pink in Drive reminds us that people are motivated not primarily through reward and punishment, but through autonomy, mastery, and purpose. When people feel trusted, heard, and empowered, something shifts. For example, one of our administrators who's here today, Diane, has been in our organization for 20 years. She's quiet and understated, but when given genuine space to contribute, her insights are thoughtful and deeply impactful. Sometimes the greatest ideas in the organization are sitting quietly in the room, waiting for an environment safe enough to invite them forward. To create a shared culture, everyone's voice needs to be valued with opportunities to be heard. The loudest voices aren't always the right way forward, and leadership isn't always found in only leadership positions. John Maxwell talks about the 360-degree leader. You can lead from anywhere within your organization. When you think about leadership as influence, you can decide, are you a thermostat or a thermometer? Are you being influenced or are you influencing? At Kaitiaki, we co-construct together our values and our strategic framework, not to just be words on paper, but to give us a shared direction and identity. We use things like workshops and collaborative feedback. We use form surveys, everything in different ways so that we could develop ideas together. This is how we developed our growth wheel. Inspired by Jim Collins' concept of a flywheel in Good to Great, it recognized that sustainable transformation rarely occurs from one dramatic initiative. Instead, momentum builds through many aligned actions over time. If you imagine a huge heavy wheel, and at first it takes so much effort to get it moving. Each push feels hard and difficult and slow. But persistence and perseverance builds on each one. Gradually, that wheel begins to turn more easily, and eventually it takes minimal effort to keep it spinning. That's what we're aiming to create, not a one-off burst of energy, but a sustained collective momentum where small aligned actions lead to meaningful and lasting growth. At the center of our growth wheel is our mission to lead in equitable, sustainable, and innovative early childhood education. Our values protect us around the outside, and then every action by any stakeholder that aligns with those values and those strategic priorities contributes to our growth, growing deeper, growing stronger, and growing our influence. Because when people feel trusted to innovate, they develop ownership. Ownership creates energy. Energy deepens engagement, and engagement strengthens practice. And strong practice creates sustainable growth. The wheel keeps turning, not because people are working harder, but because the work feels meaningful. Relationships sit at the heart of thriving cultures. And at Kaitiaki, embedding te ao Māori is fundamental, not only because of Te Tiriti of Waitangi, which it is our responsibility as treaty partners, but because tikanga creates genuine connection. Through mihi whakatau, karakia, whakatoki, and shared stories, we create opportunities for people to connect more deeply. One question we often ask as part of our mihi whakatau process is, what is your why? Why? Why are you here? Why this kaupapa? I invite you to just pause and reflect there and think about why. Why are you here today? My why is I've always wanted to make a difference in the world, making it a better place. Becoming a mother reinforced how these pivotal early years are, not only for our tamariki, but for our whānau and for our communities. I'm here because I believe creating cultures where people thrive empowers them, and it's beneficial for all of society. I'm here because tikanga is important. It's part of who we are as Aotearoa, and it creates opportunity for people to feel safe, to bring their full selves into a space, building connection and enabling growth to happen naturally. The Kaitiaki tikanga isn't reserved for a special occasion. It's part of our everyday practice. We weave tikanga and te reo Māori through both internal and external work. People are invited to learn and grow at their own pace. We use a cultural competency framework called Te Waka Horua to explore tikanga, te reo, te ao Māori, iwi, and te titi. One of our other administrators, she's called Lily, she's from China. After participating several times in our mihi whakatau process, she decided all on her own to develop her pepiha. Then, through feeling safe and included, she chose to share it with us all by her heart. She has now gone on to learn karakia to start and end hui. Not only does she use them at work, but she uses them externally at other events. Our board chair attended Tanata Tititi, which is a Treaty People workshop, and now starts all board meetings with a karakia. Because understanding creates action. That is the power of belonging. Not force, not compliance, connection. Kotahitanga reminds us, though, that we need to see the whole system. Technology, processes, staffing, well-being, communications, values, they are all interconnected. So when we introduce change in one area, it inevitably impacts another. Today, we're hearing about Infocare's latest developments. We're learning about technology and how it can improve our workplaces and our delivery. But we need to also hold the bigger picture in mind, ensuring that we plan change with holistic thinking. Recently, we explored automating some administrative functions. Initially, the response from staff was significant resistance. And honestly, that response mattered. Instead of pushing through, we paused. We shifted to a co-design process involving stakeholders across the organization. Because systems thinking reminds us, successful change is not just operationally efficient, it must also strengthen trust, relationships, and well-being. We won't always get it right, but if we remain reflective and responsive, change can strengthen the whole system rather than fracture it. At Kaitiaki, we prioritize well-being. It's not something that we should only respond to once people are struggling, but we intentionally design for it. Because burnout is not simply about workload. It's about unsupported workload, meaningless workload, or isolated workload. Just like our tamariki, we also learn and grow through playful experiences. Play is not separate from performance. It fuels creativity, connection, and resilience. It helps people to recharge and engage more deeply in their work. When well-being is prioritized, energy becomes sustainable, relationships strengthen, sickness reduces, engagement deepens, and workplaces become places where people can connect, laugh, play, and enjoy what they do. Looking after people is not a nice to have, because when people are well, they don't just cope, they flourish. In times of change, shared values become what we call the anchor for our waka. They provide stability when everything else feels uncertain. When change remains aligned to those values, people can still experience security and belonging. They may not always agree with the decision or the direction, but when the core values remain intact, their sense of identity remains intact too. They still know who they are. They still know what they stand for. And in our case, they still know that we are Kaitiaki. Our values are at the heart of who we are. They guide every relationship, every moment, and every decision we make. Our values shape how we teach, how we learn, and how we care, creating a community where every child can grow with purpose and possibility. Making shared identity visible is powerful. It creates continuity through change and helps people to stay connected to something bigger than the uncertainty that may be around them. Because sustainable change is not about abandoning who we are. It's about evolving in ways that honor what matters most. At Kaitiaki, we believe that change is not done to people, but created with people. Inclusive co-design ensures everybody has a voice and meaningful opportunities to contribute. This can look like creating pathways for involvement through things like working groups or special interest committees or leadership opportunities across transformation projects. Whether it's in areas such as health and safety, neurodiversity, sustainability, improving technology, or any other shared priorities. It is about enabling voices to be heard and creating multiple spaces for ideas to emerge. Not everyone contributes in the same way, so we intentionally provide a range of formats and opportunities for people to share, lead, and collaborate. People are genuinely invited into the process, so they don't just support change, but they actually help create it. And through that process, we build more equitable organizations where contribution is valued, leadership is shared, and everyone has a role in helping to move forward. Trust is key. Communication is key. Communication will either build trust or it will erode it. Misinformation flourishes in a vacuum, and language matters. Compare these two statements. We've decided to implement change next term versus we're exploring a change for next term and want your input to help shape it. One creates compliance, the other creates commitment. The difference is subtle, but it is transformational. Create clear feedback loops with radical transparency because it empowers people to learn why and how decisions are made. It ensures information is clear and informative. Thriving cultures are learning cultures. And at Kaitiaki, we want experimentation to feel safe. Failure is not viewed as incompetence, but as part of growth. Because when we model curiosity, reflection, and learning, tamariki learn that growth is lifelong.
Was crying. Why is it you're crying? Because it's running out of water. Here, what is pollution? We have Kaitiaki off the water. We can look after water because it's so precious to do it. We need to survive.
Our tamariki are curious explorers and investigators, noticing the world around them, asking questions, and recording what they discover.
See, it's fun.
Is that a lot? Yeah.
I'm feeling fun.
As creators, tamariki share their thoughts, feelings, concerns, and hopes.
We are learning to keep the waterways clean. Water is precious. Only rain down the drain. Keep the rubbish out of the water.
Innovation is not separate from a separate initiative, whether it's engaging in global research projects, creating and embedding cultural competency frameworks, or experimenting with new AI tools to support assessment and planning. Innovation can become part of your organizational identity. Tamariki, it's our woven mat. It's not something we stand on alone. It's something that we weave together. When woven together, the principles and strands create something resilient, adaptable, and enduring. This is the culture we are trying to create, a place where people do not simply survive, but thrive. And when people feel empowered, connected, and supported, that impact ripples outward to tamariki and whānau, within our communities, and into the future. Because when we get this right, we are not just shaping workplaces, we are shaping lives. Ka ako, ka tipu, ka puawai na tahi. We learn, we grow, and we flourish together. Kia ora. Tēnā koutou.